Our guest on this episode of Being Human is Bill Jeffery. Bill is a Canadian certified counselor and founder of the Lonely Man Project. Bill, it's great to see you over there. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Well, first of all, let's get right to it. Tell us, what does depression look like in men?
Depression in men, you know what, Lisa, one of the hallmarks of male depression is anger. We don't talk a lot about anger in when we talk about depression. We talk about sadness. We talk about loss of interest, fatigue, not wanting to be social. One of the main hallmarks of male depression is anger, and it comes out, it's one of the emotions that men have been taught that is okay to express. So anger, irritability, creating conflict. Those are hallmarks of male depression that we don't often talk about. They get overlooked as, other character traits as opposed to the depression illness that it's symptomizing. Sometimes, it's bad behavior for men, but a lot of times, it's expression of deeper issues and just having that quick temper because of something else that's been going on.
Yeah, so a lot of times it looks like road rage. We were talking a couple of minutes ago, and you were saying, yeah, sometimes it comes out as road rage or just looking like a jerk, when in reality there's so much more going on.
Absolutely, and I can attest to that. I had depression just 20 odd years ago, my first bout of depression, and exactly that. I didn't recognize having it. I didn't know what it looked like. I knew something was a little off. I didn't realize that it was depression. For me, it came from a back injury that I'd sustained, and over an 18-month span, needing surgery, and all that went with the chronic pain, I developed depression. I didn't recognize it. My sister came up from the United States, where she was studying counseling, and she looked at me and said, "How long have you had depression?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? Depression? Me? I'm like Superman." I was a wrestler, a heavyweight at university, and I was a tough guy, proverbial tough guy. I was like a Superman, and I had depression. How could that be a thing? And then she started pointing out the different behaviors, like going to Walmart and somebody putting their stuff on the belt too close to mine, not using the divider, and road rage on the highway on the 401 in Toronto. And not the place you want to have road rage. Going to Costco and having somebody not use a signal light, and 15 minutes later you bump into them, you say something to them, and you really act out, and get aggressive. And she started pointing these things out, and that wasn't me. I'd morphed into this other guy, and I didn't even realize that it had happened. On top of that, my girlfriend at the time, wife now, I was very short with her. I wasn't nice, right? And I didn't realize I was being that way. So once I realized what was going on, and I did the talk therapy, I did some antidepressants, and I realized what was happening, I had to understand more of it. So that's what set me on the road to becoming a Canadian certified counselor, was the need to understand how someone like me could be affected and not be able to power through this thing. How could I not man up and just power through and think my way out of depression? And it's just not the way that it works.
Yeah, and guys can be so hard on themselves and think, I need to man up. I need to get through this. I'm tougher than this.
Well, our socialization, since we were little boys here in around the world, really, is to be strong, to be competitive, to be dominant, right? You handle your own business. Any asking for help is seen as a sign of weakness, right? Boys don't cry, Lisa. You know that. So this is the way that we've all been brought up, and it's really affected our how we handle our emotions, and we end up suffering in silence. And then as we get older, you don't lean over to your competitor and tell them you're feeling weak, not feeling great today. Right? You keep that in. If everybody's competitive, those close relationships don't last as you go forward. So then as you get older, you end up with very little social capital. You don't have a lot of deep, nurturing relationships and networks that you can call if you go through tough times. And so loneliness has become a very, very big epidemic for men, and especially in the older men category, because we don't have this connection anymore. And a lot of it is because of the way we were socialized to be brought up. I'd like to say that, the stigma is getting better, and it is starting to get a little bit better, but it's so ingrained in a lot of us. So I remember I was coaching my son's baseball team, and he would have been maybe 9, 10 years old, and he got hit by a pitch. So out pops coach / dad out of the dugout and comes over And what do you think the first thing is that I say to him?
What do you say?
I don't go crying. And I
Mm.
caught myself, I'm like, and it's like, hey, I get it. You know, you get hit by a pitch, it hurts. Take a knee, no problem. You know, cry if you need to. But the damage was done. I knew better. I was already doing this work. But the automatic thought that popped out of me, because it's so ingrained, don't go crying. So those types of things, it's not like it's been a choice to be brought up this way. Society is dictated through the way men have been raised, through the messaging that we've had, that this is how it is. This is what it means to be a man. This is how men act. And because of that, men do keep their feelings in. We do bottle everything up until things hit rock bottom. A lot of times we don't seek help, and delayed help seeking is a real problem for men, whether it be physical or mental. And it's something that we really need to address in our men.
Mm. So Bill, walk me through what happens when someone does reach out for help. So you're a counselor, so they go in. What's the first thing you do? How do you get to it?
It really depends on the individual. I get a lot of partners reaching out to me on behalf of their husband, their boyfriend, their
Mhm.
sons, and saying, would you see so and so? And of course, I'm open. Sure, absolutely. Right? If we can get them in here, let's get them in here. So then I'll take the conversation and talk to the man. But that first step, a lot of times, is not coming from the man himself. It's coming from a partner who's making that contact. A good example, a little while ago, I had a new client who came in, and his partner had reached out to me. And so he came in and sat down. I said, so how you doing? What's going on? He said, oh, I'm fine. I said, you're fine. I said, no, your wife contacted me to contact you to have you come in. You're sitting here, we're having a conversation, and you're saying that you're fine. He said, well, she said that if I didn't seek some help, the marriage was over. But and I
Mm.
was like, and that's fine for you. That's what fine is. So what would a crisis look like if that's not a crisis? So for a lot of men, it's just making that initial step, right? But it's an issue that we have in men giving themselves permission to do that,
Mm.
permission to reach help. That it's not a sign of weakness, that they can actually reach out, get some help. That sometimes you can't battle your way through it, and you need another perspective.
Yeah.
For a lot of men, once they get here, we can work through issues, and you get the therapeutic alliance, you get openness. They realize, hey, I can work on myself and become a better dad and a better parent, and a better spouse, a better brother, sister, whatever. I can be whatever I want to be, working through therapy. But getting him into the chair is the hardest piece, and that's the stigma that's out there, because
Mm.
men don't want to take that next step. In fact, I forget the statistic, but there's a very high number of men that actually go to their doctor and say, I got an issue going on, but they don't make the next step. So I go see the doctor for, maybe antidepressants, but they never actually make that next step to go to counseling.
Mm.
So trying to get them in here is the toughest part. Once they get in here, it's the recovery rate, the rate of moving forward, the number of marriages you can save, the domestic violence rates you can bring down. That's all huge. But the stigma still keeps a lot of men from coming in, and in many cases, our mental health literally is killing us.
So just getting into a safe space and being able to talk about it, and realizing that you don't have to keep everything inside. So it's coming out in other ways, like anger. It's okay. It's okay to be able to talk about it.
It is. It's anger, but then even suicide rate globally is about 75% male.
Yeah.
Here in Newfoundland and Labrador, where I am, it's about 80% male. But it's not just the suicides, because before that, a lot of men become addicted to something. They find negative coping strategies to try and handle what's going on themselves, and it really has an effect, obviously, on the man, but on his partner, on his family, on his kids, that are collateral damage when everybody's walking on eggshells around him, and
Mm.
they don't know how to act. They don't know when he's going to blow up next, that sort of thing. So it's really, it really pains my heart when I hear guys who have gone through depression for a number of years and didn't recognize it, didn't know they had it, and they've blown a lot of things up around them that they didn't necessarily need to do if they come in and gotten some therapy, worked on the aggression, worked on what was going on around them. For me, it's about prevention. You don't need to hit rock bottom to get help. You're having a problem in your marriage, you're having a career issue, you're having financial problems. You don't need to deal with it yourself.
Yeah.
There's people out there, and nobody needs to know. You haven't got to tell everybody you're in therapy. You can keep it to yourself. You just do virtual care. You can come in through the back door. Nobody has to know. You just need to allow yourself to get the help that's out there so that you can be the best you can be.
And loads of online options for counseling now too. You don't even have to leave your house. You can do it in your office and just get help. And there's so many big platforms out there doing it. It's interesting, Bill. You said something interesting earlier that I thought was really, excuse me, that really resonated with me. You said when wives come to you, you ask, and they say, "My husband's just being a jerk," and you say, "Well, were they always that way? Is this new, or were they always a jerk, or are they suddenly a jerk?" You've really got to put it in context to identify that maybe there's a problem.
Absolutely. For you need as a spouse to support your partner. Identifying these changes for them. The fact that maybe they're not sleeping as well as they used to sleep. Maybe they are very irritable with the kids. Right? Maybe they're not wanting to go to hockey twice a week like they always wanted to before. There's these changes in behavior. So you're more aggressive when you're out in society. The problem is, Lisa, for a lot of men, they don't necessarily listen to their spouse.
Mm.
Right. And I can attest to that because, back when I had my bout of depression originally, I remember Leanne saying, like, you're not yourself. This is going on. You're saying this, you're saying that. I wasn't listening. I wasn't listening to her. It took my sister to come up and point that out.
Right.
So you don't necessarily listen to your spouse like we possibly should be. And that's where, the group context comes into play, and normalizing discussions and normalizing having the men get together on a regular basis, getting the information out there, having campaigns so that men can recognize themselves. I was part of a national research project called Bro Matters a number of years ago, and something that stuck with me from that work is how men will get the information. So men don't necessarily want to walk around with a mental health hat on. They don't want you to know what's going on with them. But if they're driving past a billboard and there's a sign up there that catches their eye and there's a website, well, later on that night when they're on their phone, they might surf to that. They might seek that out. They might identify some of what they're doing through the behaviors and say, "Oh, hold on a second, I do that. Could I have depression? Is that what's going on with me?" But the shame piece never works. Like for people, especially if partners are already fighting, to come out and say, "Well, you've changed and this is going on and you're doing this," you dig in your heels. You don't look at the validity of statements. It's just another fight back and forth. So we need to make sure that we're having campaigns out there that the information is accessible for men, and that we start to change the messaging around so that men feel like not only can they come out and get help, but that they have to come out and get help. Once you understand that there's an issue, once you understand you're going through depression and you're affecting yourself and all the people around you, the onus switches to you then to get the help that you need. But if you don't even know you're going through something, you don't know that you have depression, how do you fix that?
How do you engage in productive talking and therapy if you don't even realize that there's an issue? Let's go back to the idea of suicide, and you mentioned that 80% in your province of people who commit suicide are male, and I think that holds pretty true. Cuts across cultures, it cuts across societies. I'm also a counselor, as you know, over here in Singapore, and it's a huge concern. And men, as you know, use methods where there's no turning back, and whereas
Yeah.
women will take methods where you can get them to an emergency room and get some help. So I'm just wondering, what are and suicide ideation? A lot of people have it. It's the brain's way of sort of trying to solve problems, but it's not always a problem. Like suicidal ideation can be there, but it's not critical. It's not at a critical stage. Um, and then when they start to have a plan, as therapists, we start to get worried when they have a concrete plan on how it's all going to unfold. What's your advice, Bill, to people who've hit that stage where they're not just thinking about it, but they have a plan and they're planning on executing and doing it? What's your advice to them?
Immediately get some help.
Mm.
Immediately go to emergency and get some help. I always say, when it comes to suicidal ideation, with depression, it's kind of like having a runny nose with a cold. Right? It comes with it. It's one of the symptoms. Right? So if you're having constant thoughts of death and harming yourself, not being here anymore, go get some help early. Go talk to somebody. Work on the depression that's indicating, that symptoms indicating. If you've got a plan to move forward, you need to go get help now, right now. Again, you can't outthink depression. It tells us lies. We start to believe them. We create a perspective around us that we don't necessarily, that we can't work our way out of. The idea with suicide itself, with men, like men mask so often.
Yes.
Right. Like inside the house, the partner might know what's going on. Right. Yeah. But outside of that house, happy-go-lucky, great, laughing, joking. Right. It's exhausting for men, but they're masking it very, very well. And then they use very lethal means. Yeah. Shooting, hanging, that sort of thing. And, here in Canada, females attempt suicide more often than males. Yeah. Right. Males complete it at a much higher clip. What that tells us is that interventions can work. Because if they didn't, women's rates would far surpass men because the attempts do. But they don't, which means that when we get a chance to intervene and have a conversation and see what's going on in their lives, right, we can make a difference. The problem with men is that we don't know. Externally, we don't know if they look fine. How many times you hear the same story, right? Happy-go-lucky, just saw him last week, never knew there was a problem, and then he's in the shed. Yeah. Right? And you don't get a chance to do that intervention. So ideally with the Lonely Man Project, that was initially what we were looking to do, was create those interventions, create those opportunities to talk, right? Make that little circuit breaker beforehand, more of a preventive approach. Because if you don't know somebody's struggling, how do you help them?
Has that been hard to try to implement a project like that in a society that's really doesn't even recognize that men's mental health should be a priority?
It's taken a lot of work. It's taken many years. The Lonely Man Project was, I think, 2018, I think, when I wrote the song The Lonely Man and recorded that. But that had been on a couple of years of efforts here to try and get people to pay attention to what was going on with our men and our boys. It's just one of those things where it's hard for a lot of people to see men as being vulnerable, that men can even be vulnerable. But we're vulnerable when it comes to our mental health, and society has done that to us from a very young age. A lot of times, we'll hear the toxic masculinity, and I don't like that term, but toxic masculinity, and men need to change. But in the same breath, we're just saying, don't be who you are. But we're also not going to give you any programs and services to help with you to get you where we want you to be. Just don't be you. That's a lot of shame and a lot of guilt for guys. So, some of what I've been talking about over the last 3 years, if you want men to be where you want them to be, you have to put in some services and some changes in the system in order to get them where you want to be. Just telling someone to stop being who you have been for 50 years, right, that doesn't sound like a very, very good plan. And again, the shame piece, men are going to dig their heels in. They're not going to recognize themselves in what you're telling them. Right. So it's been a very frustrating piece, trying to get people to pay attention. The statistics have been there. Like the BC Medical Journal has called suicide an epidemic since like 2009 in Canada. And it's been one of those things that as people have started to hear what I'm saying, pay attention to the statistics, be touched by some of the issues of men's mental health and masculinity themselves, that people are starting to band together to say, oh yeah, no, we got a problem here. We got to head this off. We got to make some change. So we're at a good spot now where things seem to be changing. We do have some government lining up to make changes. I know over in the UK, they've done really well with some of the programs they have. Australia, and here at home as well, we're starting to get a lot more support for what we're trying to do. But to get to this point, it's been very frustrating, and we've lost a lot of men. A lot of families have broken up. Yeah. There's been a lot of collateral damage because we haven't paid attention soon enough.
And Bill, a lot of my male clients will feel bad because they feel like they're the only guy that doesn't have any friends, and they're struggling to they want friends and they want to make friends, but it's just not an easy thing to do. Is that something that you've witnessed in Canada as well?
Absolutely. And loneliness is a huge problem for men, a huge problem. And again, how do you break down that barrier when you're supposed to be strong and dominant and handle your own business and you're going to tell someone you're lonely? You don't have companionship, right? You had friends when you were younger, but you were so competitive and trying to, make a life for yourself that you kept everything in, and now you're not connected anymore. That's a huge problem. It's one that we're trying to address here in Canada through Harbor Strong, which is a project that I'm heading up. We're trying to get men together, working on events, shoulder to shoulder, working. Because for men, as you know, Lisa, as a counselor, it can be very intimidating for a guy to come in and just sit there and have these conversations. Right? And especially if you're out in society, to talk to another guy about what's going on.
Yeah.
But the research shows if you get guys working shoulder to shoulder, working on an activity, doing something together, they're much more likely to open up and have these conversations and make some connection. So that's kind of what we're doing with the Harbor Strong project. We're bringing guys together. We're having them do an activity, have these discussions around mental health, and redefining what it means to be a man, and trying to get these guys. We're hoping that they'll make connections at these events that we're hosting, and they, as they go forward, they're going to have other guys to lean on, and they'll take it themselves and have events and grow it that way. But loneliness is really been a problem for men, and as they get older, it becomes even harder to address because men have to admit, I need connection, and I don't have a whole lot of friends around. And so guys are literally wanting to come out and not allowing themselves to cross that barrier and knock the stigma down to come out. So we got a lot of work to do on the stigma front just to make it okay for guys to come out to these events.
Yeah, and when a relationship breaks up, separation or divorce is also devastating because they don't have the friend support group that women often have in place. I love all of these initiatives that you're talking about, Bill, and I know that you've been going around talking to um, kids in schools with the Be a Man project, and you're doing your part to try to redefine what kids think it's like to be a man. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the younger boys coming through, they're really caught in a bit of an identity crisis because what they were taught to be a man and what that means, right, is not going to serve them well out in the public anymore. We haven't done a great job in the schools yet to address the changing society and the roles that men have. So a lot of the young boys are coming up with the same ideas of masculinity that I would have had 30 years ago. And when you go in, you talk to some of these kids and you say, what does it mean to be a man to you? And they say it means to be strong and be competitive and be dominant. You handle your own business. You don't need no help, right? And one kid actually said it means beating up other kids.
Oh,
Right? Stuff from 30 years ago that you don't come out and you do that kind of stuff now. That's not going to help you. Right? But we haven't focused enough on our boys coming through school that a lot of these kids are coming out with these same mantras, and then I'm seeing them in here in my counseling practice looking for help, wondering why they're feeling so lost at 20 years old. So the BMM program is addressing the fact that we're losing some of these boys when they come out of school to far left, far right. Think Andrew Tate and these types of guys, because we haven't given them an alternative. We've taken masculinity and we've said it's shameful to be a man. There's a lot of guilt. Right? Men are responsible for the state of the world right now, and when young men are coming out, they're feeling that, and so they got a welcoming community on the left. They got a welcoming community on the right, saying, "Hey, you belong over here. We got belonging. Right? You'll fit right in." And so they get radicalized to either side, but we haven't put anything in the middle to say, "Hey, this is what it actually means to be a man." There's no shame and guilt. There's nothing wrong with masculinity. We just need to shift it a little bit so that we can incorporate handling your feelings and feeling your feelings and handling some of the aggression. And how do you handle, having friends, and can you lean on each other, right? Having some compassion, some empathy. So all we need to do is redefine what it means to be a man just enough so that we can take care of some of these toxic behaviors, because masculinity is not toxic. Behaviors are toxic. So we can address the behaviors that we've taught them as they're growing up. We can eradicate the toxic masculinity, and these guys can feel better about themselves coming out, and they won't need to go to the left or the right because they're going to feel fine. it's really interesting because when I talk to these classes, as soon as I tell them it's okay to be young men, there's nothing wrong with it, you can literally feel the tension in the room come down, because the boys are in there. It's a male counselor coming in, and hell, here we go. He's gonna talk at us. He's gonna tell us why we're broken or what's wrong with young men. And I go in and I don't say that. Right? There's nothing wrong with being young men. Right? You're perfectly fine. Right? But these behaviors are not going to serve you well going out, I don't think. And I usually start by asking them what it means to be a man, and then how is this going to work for you when you come out? And then we talk about masculinity and mental health and all these other things. And at the end, we come back to it and say, now, what do we think would actually work better for us when we come out of high school? And it's usually a whole different perspective. But you can really feel the tension. You can cut it with a knife when you go in, because they're just expecting that they're going to be talked to and things are bad again. And here we go. They got some counselor in to tell us why we're wrong. And when you don't do that, you can really make an impact on them. So it's really rewarding work. And we're looking to expand that over the next year so that the boys are in a better place when they come out. And even, you look at the career choices. We all make different career choices. I remember a time when I was looking at political science way back when.
We were political science students together in Canada.
I didn't go through with that. I decided to change into business. But a lot of these kids are coming out and they've only looked at, business and engineering, a lot of the boys. The problem is that, 20 or 30 years ago, most of them were going to get into the program. And now the program is more 50-50 male and female, which just means that, a lot of the boys that might have got in 20 years ago are not going to get in now.
Yeah.
So they're not getting in the program. And then they're coming in here at 20 years old feeling like complete failures because they didn't have a backup plan. They just had engineering. That's what they were always going to do. And that's what they were told by their parents that they were going to do. And, that's what young men do, business and engineering.
It's acceptable.
And there's such a whole gamut out there of careers that we need to start getting these guys ready for. But to feel that you didn't get into a program and your life is a complete failure at 20 years old, we got to do better than that as a society.
Bill, let me ask you, before we wrap this up, what's your final piece of advice if you had to leave our viewers? Our viewers are mainly professionals. They're working everywhere. They're stressed. They're working around the world. They're stressed out, really high pressure jobs, a lot of them. If you had to give them one piece of advice or a few nuggets of wisdom, what would it be? If you could share what your takeaways from your role as a counselor in Canada.
You don't have to have all the answers. That would be my advice. I recently talked to a CEO who went through a period of mental health issues, caused himself some issues in the family and that sort of thing, because as a CEO, he thought that everybody came to him. He couldn't look for help. He put all the pressure on himself to have those answers. Right? We don't have to have all the answers. Right? Being human is a great name for a podcast, but it's also a great motto for life. We're human. Right. And there's going to be situations where we need some help. We need some perspective. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you any less than. Right. Mental health, we all have it. Mental illness doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're a CEO. It doesn't care if you're an executive. It doesn't care if you're a professional. It doesn't care where you work. And it can affect us at any time. I'm a good example of that because I tried to power through it 20 odd years ago. You can't do it. There's absolutely no shame in getting help. The strength is in finding help. The strength is in saying, hey, I need to work on myself. I need to bounce some ideas off somebody else. I can't think my way out of this. Give yourself permission to find some help, to better yourself, to allow yourself to go do what you need to do. You know what? You go to the gym to be stronger is no different than doing some mental fitness. You can go and talk to somebody, make yourself stronger. A lot of problems you just can't come up with a new solution for after so long. Allow yourself to go talk to somebody and work on yourself. There's no shame in it.
Bill, on that note, thank you so much for joining us. I love the work that you're doing and wishing you all the best with it. Keep it up.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And we'll put the link to your song and all of your related websites in the description to this video so people can click below and get in contact. Bill Jeffery, it's been wonderful seeing you again, my old friend.
You too, Lisa. You take care.